for that, because I think that actually puts it in a framework of where we are today, not where we would maybe like it to be. I work with a lot of people that say, we don't need this technology, let's just, put the genie back in the bottle, and the genie ain't going back in the bottle because it's way out there. And it's not just the United States. I mean, the United States is the leader and has provided this terrible model of using drones in a way that violates country sovereignty, that hides the facts from the American people, that puts the drones in the hands of unaccountable, not even a military agency like the CIA, no transparency, that won't even give the legal memos to the congressional people who are supposed to be doing the oversight of that, who says then, because American lives are not at risk, these are not wars, so there's no reason to go to Congress for that, and that says that that due process doesn't even mean judicial process anymore these days. I mean, there's so many ways in which the way we are using this is wrong, and the signals that we have sent out to the rest of the world are so dangerous. Now, I hope that the bombing yesterday had nothing to do with 9/11, with the conflict between us and other countries, I hope. But boy, you can see how it might. And especially having come back from Pakistan and met with people who feel like their rights are being violated constantly, that they have been shown by the United States that their lives don't have very much value to the American people because you can snuff them out with a drone just because you think they might be a suspect. And as Frank said, what is the imminent threat to us? What is the danger? And with no accountability at all. So in the meantime, the United States is building up these drone bases all over the world, not just around the Middle East, but also in Africa now, also around the Pacific, and is selling drones overseas. You have the Israelis who have been using drones against the Palestinians, as well as the Lebanese, since the 1980s, and have bragged in their marketing that they test these out in the battlefield constantly, which is true, and they are selling drones to over 50 countries, just the Israelis. And then you have the Chinese that are coming in there and saying, oh, a market in weapons, we better get involved in this too. And they are producing now dozens of different types of drones, including armed drones. And the latest I saw is that the South Africans now have armed drones as well that they have just sold to the Saudis. So whether or not we want to see an end to the use of lethal drones, they are out there. So then if you step back and you say, okay, what can we do to start putting some regulations in place, I would say one place to start is to get drones out of the hands of the CIA. Now there is a controversy, and maybe in the discussion we can talk about, will that do any good at all? And there are some people that say, no, it will be exactly the same thing. And in fact, look at the military. The military is using the drones in Afghanistan, and the military has upped the number of drone strikes in the last years, just as the U.S. is supposed to start withdrawing the troops. And we have the number of strikes, in fact, 506 strikes by the military in Afghanistan in 2012, the largest number of the drone strikes ever. And we don't know the casualty figures, right? Anne Wright, who we should recognize here in the audience? We don't know the casualty figures. So where is the accountability and where is the transparency there? Although some would say that the Pentagon now, when it mistakenly kills people in a drone strike, is supposed to acknowledge and apologize and provide compensation. Whereas if you go right next door in Pakistan, and if some innocent family is killed with a drone strike, they will get no acknowledgement, no apologies, and no compensation because it's the CIA. There are also people who say the CIA is very hard to do any oversight, and most of the oversight that is done behind closed doors, whereas if it's the armed services, there is more possibility of more oversight. So again, it's an open question and a good discussion to have, but I actually think it's a positive move to get the drones away from the hands of the CIA, because I think the CIA has done, well, we know in the case of Pakistan, it's done a tremendous amount of killing and a lot of killing of civilians, and has no mechanisms for forcing them to be open. In fact, when the ACLU and the Center for Constitutional Rights have taken the CIA to court the CIA has been able up to now to say drone program. What drone program? Tremendous problems about the way that the drones are used, the proliferation of drones, and I'm going to leave it to Shahid, who's going to talk about the drones coming back to haunt us here in the United States, not from a terrorist group or from another country droning us, but from our own agencies within the U.S. government. But I do want to spend the rest of my time just talking about some of the positive things that are happening. Because I started out asking how many of you would agree to use drones against terrorist suspects, and we only had a couple of people raise their hands. If you had taken this poll a year ago in the general public, you would have found 83% of the American people. And you know, when you say terrorist suspect, that kind of means that nobody's had a chance to be charged, tried, or convicted of anything. So let's be clear about that. And now, if you take that same poll, it would be way down like 60%. Still a majority of Americans, but the numbers have changed dramatically. And that is partly because the work that a number of us here in the room and around this country and around the world have been doing to give the word drones a bad name. A year ago, the word drones did not have a bad name. Now it has such a bad name. I did a lot of work around sweatshops, making people feel like, you know, where are you getting your clothes in a sweatshop? The drone should have the same negative connotation as the word sweatshop does. And we saw this in the congressional hearing the other day when the head of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems, you know, it's not the head of the Drone Association, said to Congress, you know, you shouldn't really be using that word drone. We don't like to use that word drone. And to Senator Leahy's credit, he did stop and say, excuse me, we will use the word we want, and I think we're going to use the word drone. So it shows you something when the association is very afraid of even the term drone being used. It's starting to sink into the American public that maybe these aren't as precise as we've been told, maybe they're not as cheap as we've been told, and maybe they're not as effective as we've been told. And that's really the important thing to get out to the American public is how counterproductive these are, because they have become the best recruiting tool for the Taliban and for Al-Qaeda and extremist organizations in general. And so the positive thing is more and more Americans are starting to question this policy. The positive thing is that there is now discussion in inner circles of our government whether the drones should be taken out of the hands of the CIA. Rumor has it that they say it should, except for Pakistan, which is a crazy thing because the main problem, the CIA in drones, is in Pakistan. The other exciting thing is all of the protests that have been happening. Now where the drones are being piloted and the bases is in the United States, there are regular protests and growing protests. This month has been a month of protests against drones. Started out in April with people protesting at the Creech Air Force Base outside of Nevada, where there have been a number of protests. We then went to San Diego, where the General Atomics is headquartered, so not only at the drone bases, but also at the headquarters of some of the manufacturers of the drones, like General Atomics, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, some of the manufacturers of certain components of the drones. And it was really great to be in San Diego because we went to the factory, the headquarters, and the home of the CEO. And that was really fun because we took our own little drone there and we said, okay, we're going to launch our own drone over the home of the CEO and see how he likes it. And this was one of those $300 drones that you can buy on Amazon.com. And we were there, and the police were very nice to us until we brought out the drone. And then they said, you can't use that without a permit. And they said, yeah, that sounds like a good law. Let's put that into effect. And then he said, and we said, why can't we use it? We already lynched it. It was up in the air, and we started to say, no, you know, we're going to confiscate the drone and everything. We said, why? And he said, somebody might get hurt. And we said, yes, exactly the point we want to make here. So we got a lot of press in San Diego, the Union Tribune, the TV stations. In fact, we started getting calls. There's one guy within the headquarters now that calls me every single day to give me a little update about what they're saying. Oh, they told us the protesters were coming and don't pay any attention and go in the back way instead of the front way. And then he calls and he says, you know, there's a lot of people in here who are with you. We didn't come into this company because we wanted to kill children. We thought we were doing this technology for something good. and keep up the protests. Our only problem is you're not doing it enough. You need more people out there. And then he called me yesterday and he said, they just handed out a newsletter here. It was really disgusting. It shows the CEO shaking hands and ready to cut a cake with these dictatorships in the Middle East, like the Sheikh in Abu Dhabi, and we don't like that stuff in here. So it's interesting to know that there are people on the inside who would like to see their companies shift focus and maybe make drones for humanitarian purposes or even maybe some commercial purposes, but not for killing people. And then the religious community is starting to speak out more. There were a group of 100 religious leaders who came out against John Brennan's nomination. There was recently a group called the National Black Churches Initiative, representing 34,000 churches, that came out and said that these drones are immoral, illegal, and they said they are evil, and that anybody who really considers themselves a spiritual person has to fight against these drones. And then we have 2 initiatives coming up in this month around stopping the proliferation of drones. One is that in the recent World Social Forum, a gathering of people all around the world, we had a workshop with Ann Wright back there, and there were people in that workshop who represented 15 different countries, and they said, we don't want to just talk about it, we want a global network against the use of these killer drones. Let's start it here and now. And so we have begun to create this global network. And the other thing that's happening this month is that next week in London, a number of the groups, including Amnesty International, that worked on campaigns together to ban landmines and cluster bombs, are announcing a campaign to try to stop it in its tracks before it starts the next version of these drones, which will be totally autonomous without any kind of pilot in even remotely controlling them. They'll be pre-programmed and go out in swarms and be told where to go and who to kill. So
we just hope they use sensor technology that's a little better than that iFace thing you have on your computer, you know, the one that identifies, you know, your daughter and your cousin as the same person.
Well, let's hope that we can even do better than that and stop them before they're being used. And so that's just a taste of some of the things that are going on both in this country and internationally that I think is moving us forward to get some kind of control over the use of this technology. Thank you.
I want to start by thanking the organizers of this event, each of you,